What's up guys, Intellitech Studios here, and today we'll be doing the full review on the Miele Dynamic U1. This particular version is the Twist model, and the full name of this machine is the Miele Dynamic U1 Twist Powerline Power Plus, but it's often known as simply the Miele U1 or the Miele S7. There are a bunch of different versions of this model in various colors with various extra features. This is the baseline model without the electronic controls, without the headlights, and without the extra accessories that you can get in addition. This particular machine has been discontinued, but you can definitely find a lot of these on the used market and floating around on eBay and such, so it's worth still doing a full review on, because it's honestly a shame that it's been discontinued, because after using this machine as my daily machine for the last several weeks, I've been very, very happy with this machine. It's not perfect, it definitely has its faults just like every other machine that exists, but it's pretty darn solid. There's a lot of things that I've complained about on other vacuums that have been eradicated on this specific unit, and we'll get into those as we go along with this review. So, unfortunately, you can't get this anymore, at least not to my knowledge, but maybe it's worth hunting one down. Parts are still available from your local Miele dealer, so you can definitely grab one of these secondhand, take it into your dealer, and have it repaired. So, that is definitely something worth mentioning. Now, this machine is a very premium machine. It's sold for hundreds and hundreds of dollars. This particular one is the more baseline model, and the prices on this were kind of all over the place, but you could definitely get these for a pretty solid price. I believe around $500 when these were new, but I could be wrong about that. I forgot to double check pricing. But definitely, if you got these from your dealer, you could always get a bundle with it with some extra bags and some extra attachments. But the twist models aren't as prevalent from what you would see from local dealers, because a lot of times they would try to incentivize you to get one of the more premium models, so that way a lot of the extra accessories and features could simply be bundled in without having to be sold separately. So you don't see as many of these twist models out there. You'll see a lot of the white cat and dog, you'll see a lot of the black maverick, and then once in a while you'll see the jazz or the salsa or the I think there was another model whose name I'm blanking on, but definitely the white and the black are the most common. I'd say the white's probably the most common, and then followed by the black, and then the red is pretty close, then the blue, and then of course the weird, gross yellow color is definitely dead last in terms of what you're going to find. So if you have a color preference, just know that there are differences in features between the different colors, which, you could argue one or two ways. Either that's great because it means that at a glance you can tell which model it is, but it also means that if you want a specific color, you might have to either spend extra for features you don't want or not get all the features you might want. In my case, this blue model actually doesn't bother me too much because the headlight would have been nice to have. It would have a bank of LED headlights right where this black strip is. But these days, I don't really care as much about headlights as I used to, so it's not a big deal to me. And technically, there's nothing stopping you from converting the parts over and turning it into a higher end unit. But this particular machine is definitely one where there are a lot of other things I like about it, even with being the base model. So right off the bat, unlike its other German competitor SIBO, we actually have a proper brush roll shutoff. So we've got fingertip controls for power and fingertip controls for the brush roll. And we also have a brush roller shutoff that turns off whenever the machine is in the upright position, which is excellent. Now, there are, yes, some SIBO models like the Dart and the Felix that have that feature. But if you're comparing a more standard style upright to something like the G or the X series, you're not going to get that feature. Even with the X series, which you could argue is competitive to these models since they both have some form of an automatic height adjustment, those models do not have a brush roll shutoff. This does. So that is right there is one nice feature that really all the SIBOs should have, but for some reason they don't, despite them being more expensive. The Miele actually does have that, and it's nice. And while we're on the topic of height adjusting, I'll show you the bottom of this machine, since the way that this achieves automatic height adjustment is pretty interesting. So right off the bat, you've got a metal base plate, which I kind of have mixed thoughts on. I actually prefer plastic base plates because metal is always going to be more likely to scratch your floors. Because yes, you do have these bumpers and they're definitely nice, but it is possible these could get worn down and the metal could scrape your floors. But it does serve some sort of effect. It obviously makes it a bit easier for it to glide across the floor and all that. So it's just a matter of personal preference. I don't necessarily mind having it, but I don't explicitly care for it either. We do have a very nice brush roll that spins very greatly. We've got little guides right here to cut hair off. This is obviously not going to be a hair-resistant tangling brush roll. I said that weird. This is not a hair tangle-resistant brush roll, so you will have to maintain it and periodically clean it out. But the nice thing is that it's got those grooves, so you can easily cut the hair off without having to remove this base plate. We've also got some little swivel casters. Unlike the Dirt Devils, where these would be on the back, these are actually on the front, so it makes it a little bit easier to steer the machine. And we've got a nice little rubber squeegee to help seal it on bare floors. We've also got a couple little suction channels as well that seem to do the trick. Right on the bottom, we've got a little sticker showing us some minor information about the machine, but not too much. It does say this is the model SHAE0, which I actually never looked at. Right on the back, we can actually see the wheel setup, which is a little bizarre on this unit. It does have nice rubber-coated wheels, but you can see there's a lot of complicated sort of mechanisms in here that this machine kind of deals with, and as you recline the machine, you can really feel it kind of switch between the different mechanisms, and there are some parts of this that are prone to breaking. So you got to be a little bit careful with these. They definitely can't take as much abuse as a SIBO, but they're still pretty okay. But this is kind of a complicated design. The wheels are supposed to go back up into the unit, so that way the entire front piece can kind of glide on carpet a little bit more easily, which is definitely an interesting concept, and it does work, but it just seems a bit needlessly complicated. But that being said, it does work, and you can still get all the parts for these, so it's not a super big deal. I have seen these break once in a while on secondhand units that are out there, but my unit is obviously holding up just fine, so I don't really have many complaints about that. One other thing while we're down here is that I mentioned the automatic height adjustment, but you don't really see any obvious evidence of that. And the reason why is because we've actually got a spring mechanism that's in this entire setup. So there are springs on both sides of the brush roller, and that independently allows each side to kind of get pushed up into the housing a little bit based off the resistance that you get off the carpet or floor surface, which is a really fascinating idea because it means that as long as the tension is held, which does appear to be the case with a lot of these, then it can essentially just automatically push the brush out of the way from the resistance of the floor if it so deems necessary, which it seems to actually work, because whenever I'm on a thicker pile carpet, if it's a soft, thick pile carpet, then it can very easily only give a little bit of pushback, and that allows the bristles to dig deep into the carpets, but it's also not artificially lowered to the point where if you have a more delicate floor, it's not going to jam the bristles into it and tear up the carpet. It's got a nice balance. And these bristles are very dense. They don't stick out a crazy amount, but because the actual assembly sticks out more, it makes up the difference. We can probably see right there. That might be really hard to see, but the bristles do stick out a good fair amount. So we can see that it does actually agitate pretty well, despite the fact these bristles are fairly soft. So these bristles are fairly soft, but they are very dense, and they are built pretty well. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the brush roll on my Amway Clear Track, but not quite. If you've had any Miele canister with the standard EBK 360 power nozzle, then you're likely very familiar with this brush roll design. It's definitely a tried and true design, and it works very well on the U1. This isn't the most aggressive cleaner that I've had. It's not so overly aggressive, but it also does deep clean pretty well. There are definitely other machines that deep clean well. In fact, when I compare this to both my SIBO and my Dyson, I get that they're all very similar in playing fields. I know there's generally the idea that one will perform better than the other, but all three of those machines tend to do very well at picking up debris and getting dirt deep out of carpets. So it seems like in this higher end price range, a lot of machines are going to clean very well, and you don't usually have to worry about that because the SIBOs clean well. Modern Dysons actually clean surprisingly well, and then of course SIBOs have gotten a lot better in cleaning performance as well on the X series, and the standard models have always cleaned very well. So if you're worried about this thing not being able to clean your carpets effectively, I wouldn't worry about that. It seems like it does really well. I can hear it picking stuff up, and even though it's not overly aggressive, it does a really good job at cleaning carpets, and it does a solid job at grooming and separating pile too. It's not the best, but it's far, far, far from the worst. It's perfectly acceptable, and it's perfectly adequate in terms of performance. And when I say adequate, I don't mean like it's not desirable. I mean adequate in terms of it does the job. You can be confident that it will clean your carpets, at least based off of the testing that I've done on my specific type of carpet. It seems to lend itself pretty okay. So this automatic height adjustment setup and this whole wheel setup does work very well, and these little casters do actually complement the swivel neck very nicely. So cleaning performance related to the carpet and everything is all as you'd expect. It's pretty solid. Now, bare floor performance I found was pretty typical for an upright. Because this machine doesn't have any kind of soft roll or anything like that, it just has a brush roll that shuts off. It's very similar to a lot of other machines that have a brush roller shut off, where if you're trying to vacuum up fine debris, as long as it's close enough to the air intake, it does a great job. In fact, it does better than a lot of other machines with similar specs. But what it struggles at is any sort of larger debris. For a lot of that stuff, you're going to have to pull out the wand to use it, and that's not anything to pick on the Miele about. That's just about every upright that has the only uprights I can think of that still are able to pick up larger debris without a soft roller are machines like the Dyson Ball Animal 3, where you can actually open up the front of the nozzle to allow that stuff to pass through specific guide channels. With every other machine, it's very typical. It does just fine at picking up crumbs and very small fine debris, like if you drop any flour on the floor or any crumbs from cookies or pizzas or whatever it is you're making in your kitchen or anything like that, or little hairs that get on the floor. It picks all that up just fine, but it's not exactly going to be the kind of machine that I pull out to clean the bare floors. It's still not exactly that, but it's good enough to where if I'm cleaning the entire house, I can also run it over the bare floor and be reasonably happy with the results, especially because for the bigger pieces of debris, the hose and the wand are easy to access if I need to pull up any big pieces like that, which I have done in the past, and it's not a big deal. It's perfectly adequate. It reminds me a lot of using a Dyson or a Phantom, where yes, maybe it doesn't clean as well on bare floors, but you can just pull out the wand, immediately get something, and put it back. So to me, that makes up for it, and for the type of machines that I'm used to, it's very comfortable in terms of the way that you would deal with a situation like that, because the hose and the wand are so easy to access. And since we're on that subject, we'll flip it over and talk about the hose, the wand, and the attachments. So, the hose is mounted right up like this, so you would think, okay, it's a high mounted hose, because the bag, which I'll show you in a sec, the bag actually loads in from the top. So you think, oh no, it's going to be like the SIBO where it's really top heavy because of the hose. No, because one thing the Miele U1 does is it takes the low mounted hose from the Dyson, which is an excellent feature on the Dyson, that lets you pull the machine by the hose without tipping it over because it's at such a low anchor point. And it takes the top mounted bag dock connector from the SIBO and combines them both into the best of both worlds, which I really like. So right off the bat, you've got a hose with a handle that's built in, and you've got a wand. The wand telescopes, one thing I've always wanted to see on something like a Dyson. And one other thing that a lot of other reviewers and consumers have complained about that I don't really take issue with, but is definitely a welcome addition on the Miele, is the fact that because of this design, it means that I can push this button, pop out the hose, and the wand is still on board. So I don't have to worry about setting the wand aside separately. Now, that's not really a feature that bothers me too much, but there are a lot of people who do hate having to set the wand from a Dyson or a Phantom aside in order to use just the hose itself. So for those people, you've got a solution. The wand still stays on the machine, and you can pull it off independently or with the hose. Obviously, it's a lot harder to pull it off after you've already pulled off the hose. But you can pull this off, and it actually telescopes. You can push this button right here and expand it. It's kind of hard to show with one hand, but you can expand this to a pretty decent length. Just push this button right here, and the wand extends. And it actually gets a pretty fair length. And then you've got a little notch right there on the hose, which you probably can't see all that well. There's a little notch right there, and you just click it in, or if it was already on the machine, that's already on. And this is a metal wand, but you do have, unlike a lot of other machines, like for example the Phantom Fury Limited Edition, unlike that machine, you actually have a plastic end piece, which means you're not going to scratch up anything you're trying to vacuum or your attachments. So that works. This still does get scuffed up. You can see the actual metal kind of finish is getting scratched off a little bit from age, but all the attachments do fit on just fine. So all that is fine. Also, one other weird little tidbit is that I actually discovered that, at least it's been a while since I tried this, but I might actually try this in a sec. But I discovered that some shark attachments also fit on here, which now kind of makes me wonder if I should go try that and see if that worked. Moment of truth. Aha! So, if you want some extra cheap attachments, you can actually use your old shark attachments, because presumably you replaced this, or you replaced a shark with this. You can actually use your old shark attachments on this, which is kind of cool. And I believe the Bosch machines are the same way. So if you got old Bosch attachments, while this is not a standard 1.25" fitting, there are other machines that use this tool fitting, so you can get that. Or, I mean, if you want to get these Miele accessories and use these on your shark so you can actually have some good tools for once, that works too. Now for me, having this super long crevice tool in addition to the wand, that's really cool. So I'm actually kind of glad that works. So in addition to the shark attachments that you can use on this machine, you also have the Miele attachments, which of course fit on board. Now this machine comes with 3 attachments that fit on board, and there is an optional turbo nozzle that's made by Wesselwerk that's pretty decent too. But you've got an upholstery tool, and this is one of the best upholstery tools that I've ever used. It's very similar in design to a lot of the Dyson ones, where it has the 2 felt strips. And the Sebo upholstery tool that I mentioned in my previous X7 review, I was very disappointed with, because the one brush strip that it has in the middle doesn't actually pull hair off that well, and yet all the hair that it does pull off gets stuck in it, and it's really difficult to get clean without picking it out with your fingers. This does not have that problem. This tool does a great job of cleaning up pet hair, and one of the things I love about this machine is the suction adjustment, which we'll talk about since we're on this subject of the hose. Now, the way this is labeled is a little confusing, for sure. Now, by default, it's going to be on the smooth option, which is basically high, but it's a little bizarre because it starts at like almost all the way high, and then when you put it in the upright position after you're done vacuuming the floor, then it gets a little bit stronger and a little bit louder, and the suction gets a little bit heavier, which is really strange because if anything, you'd think it'd be the other way around. So this is not a carpet height adjustment, not even close. It's just suction. There's no carpet height adjustment on this machine, at least not any formal one. This is merely adjusting suction. These labels are really confusing. Really, it should be low, medium, low, high, medium, high. That would probably be a little bit more straightforward. But on the curtain mode, which is what I find myself using the tools on all the time, this is excellent. Not only does it have perfectly the amount of suction to clean up pet hair and everything else off my couches and off my curtains with any of the attachments, I don't even have to pick one in particular, it also runs super quiet in that mode. In fact, I can turn this on and demonstrate that I can still talk normally. I can still talk normally with the vacuum on that mode. It's super quiet. It has like very little suction, but it has just enough to get everything clean, and it still has a lot of airflow and has plenty of suction to get anything cleaned up, which I really, really love. So there have been multiple times where I've vacuumed my couch with this tool, and there have been many other machines where I would go to vacuum my couch and I'd have to go over it multiple times to get the hair. Now, because of the way my couch is woven, there still are some bits of hair that will get stuck in the pleather of my couches and will not come out with any tool and need to be plucked out by hand. But this still does the best. This machine with this tool still does the best out of every vacuum. And I've used every Dyson. I've used basically every overall Sebo design, at least. And this is better than all of them. It's better than any Shark, it's better than any Bissell, Hoover, whatever you can think of. Every single vacuum in recent memory that I've tried on my upholstery, this does better than any upright. The reason why I say upright is because the Dyson V8 with the turbo nozzle, with the actual motorized power nozzle, is basically identical to this in terms of its ability to get stuff up. But I still prefer this because I'm not wielding an entire handheld. I just have the hose. So this is fantastic. This is legitimately one of the best upholstery tools that I've ever used, at least in my household, on my couch, and with my dog and cat hair. So this upholstery tool is excellent. I really can't say enough good things about it, and I can't even realistically suggest anything that would improve it. And it stores right here on board. I guess if I really wanted to nitpick and bitch, I guess I could say that when you have the cord on here, it's a little hard to get to this tool, but who cares? Right underneath, we've got a crevice tool, which is decently long. I mean, it's a crevice tool, there's not much to say about it. It works. It does the trick. There have been other crevice tools that I've had that have been shorter, and I've heard other people complain about those crevice tools not being long enough. For me personally, this is kind of overkill when it comes to a crevice tool, at least to me. But I'd rather have too much than not enough when it comes to crevice tools. So, it's fine. It does the trick. It gets into crevices, and it is a tool. So, A+. And finally, the dusting brush. Now, again, this is very reminiscent of Dyson. We've got, and for the record, I'm not saying that because I believe the Dyson came first. I don't know which came first. I don't care. It doesn't matter. But that's what it reminds me of. So we've got what looks like a DC-07 or DC-14 dusting brush with the little swivel neck that lets you turn it into an angled dusting brush. But it's very small. It's very small, doesn't take up a lot of space, which at first I thought was going to be annoying. But honestly, it doesn't bother me because you can get into smaller spaces with it, and it still does everything I need a dusting brush to do. These bristles are nice and soft. They appear to be horsehair or something similar, some similar type of bristles. The bristles do remind me of my Phantom Fury, but the layout of the tool is a lot better. The round shape makes a lot more sense for a dusting brush like this, and it just overall does a solid job. So really no complaints when it comes to this dusting brush. Again, just like with the upholstery tool, this is one of the best dusting brushes that I've seen on board a vacuum. Now, in terms of overall dusting, not trying to fit into smaller spaces, I do like the Dyson soft dusting brush a little bit more than this, but that is obviously better for dusting large surfaces like tables or something like that, whereas this is better for a multi-purpose attachment because it can do smaller spaces as well. So I really like this tool. Again, there's not really much I can nitpick about it. You know, sometimes stuff gets stuck in here, but that's the nature of any dusting brush. I don't really know. There's not really much else for me to complain about. It just simply works. It's pretty solid. And yeah, I do think the angle that it's at by default is a little strange, but it's definitely perfectly adequate. I haven't tried to do anything crazy like dust my ceiling fan with it yet. It doesn't seem like it would be very good for that. But remember, Shark tools do fit on this, and I believe there is a Shark version of the Dyson up top tool, so you might be able to jerry-rig that to get that to work on this, to use this machine to dust the top of your ceiling fan blades. So there's definitely a solution for a lot of this stuff, because this machine can also fit the Shark attachments. So you've got some of the best attachments that you can get on board, and you have access to one of the biggest vacuum ecosystems of tools that are really popular right now. So you've got a lot of great options. And the great things don't stop there. This hose, I'm not trying to gush about this thing, but this hose is simply brilliant. It compresses really far, so it takes up very little space on the machine when it's stored, but it stretches. It just stretches and stretches and stretches and stretches. Like, I can't visualize this on camera, but if you've seen my living room, I'm standing in my doorway that goes into the hallway that goes into my kitchen. You know, so I'm at least a good 12 feet away from the vacuum. And, you know, the hose is still fine. And it stretches more than any other hose, but unlike the Dyson hoses, it doesn't fight you at all. So like the airflow doesn't fight, which is really great. Now granted, I mostly use it on the curtain mode, so maybe it fights you more on the other modes. But the simple fact that there is a mode that works and has enough airflow and suction, even on the lowest mode, to still pick up everything, even with the hose fully extended, that's impressive. This is easily my favorite machine out of all the machines that I have to use the tools on for that reason. If I had to nitpick, it'd be nice if I could use the hose without this handle, but it is a really nice handle. It legitimately is designed very well, and I really like it. And of course, there's the fact that the wand is telescoping, one of the things I've also complained about with other machines, so you can get a good amount of distance out of it. And like I said, even if this distance isn't enough, you can fit other attachments onto it to give you even more reach. So, just absolute great things all around. Of course, this wand, I keep trying to put this on the wrong way, but this wand just pushes on right over here, and you grab this hose. There's also a locking mechanism down here, so if you want, you can twist it like that, and then it locks in the downward position, so it's actually facing down. So now you can't pull it back up, and you can pull the machine behind you. So if you have something like a bare floor tool on the end of this, and you're actually using it like a canister and going around your room, you're not going to tip the thing over. Again, if I really had to nitpick something on this, I would say the cord does kind of get in the way a little bit when you're trying to put the hose up. As you can see, you have to kind of fish it through, and it's a little bit awkward to clip this back into place. And then the only other thing is that when you put this, make sure the camera catches this. So when you put this hose back in this clip right here, I notice that for whatever reason, the actual molding for the hose isn't actually up high enough. So there's just this area where it kind of just does that. And I don't know if that's just like a manufacturing defect, but it seems like this actual guide right here is supposed to be a cup, like maybe another inch up. So it kind of just flops a little bit. But I mean, if you ask me, that's pretty nitpicky, all things considered, because I have seen some of these where the hoses are pushed out like that and they look really stupid, but you can kind of just slap it back into place, at least on my unit, and it's not really a problem. It's definitely something that you don't really notice when you're actually using the machine. It's just if you're super OCD, it might bother you because there's just a bit more squish right there, for lack of a better word. But overall, the tools and the overall hose and wand setup, I mean, if I really had to nitpick, maybe make the wand a little bit longer, maybe make it telescope a couple more notches, maybe. But really, there isn't much I can complain about. I guess 1.25" fitting would be nice, but again, there's clearly plenty of ecosystem with this setup, so there's not really a problem there. So again, it's just really great with the tools, and there just really isn't much else that I can really say about it. It just simply does a great job. And since we're on the subject, we can see in between all these tools we have a carrying handle, which is balanced very well, but the machine is very heavy. So as much as I talked about how great the usability of the tools is, the usability of the main upright is definitely a little bit bizarre and awkward. Yes, it has, one of the features that it has that kind of helps make up for it is it has one of the smoothest swivel necks on any vacuum. When you press this button right here, you can release it back, and it is a little awkward when it releases because you can feel the gears with those wheels kind of moving out of the way. And now there's a little tab that got pushed out of the way that now allows us to twist the actual machine. And there's also a little function where you can press this button. It's not really a button, but you can press this, and it has enough support for the head that you can pull the head up to move it onto a rug or move it over something. Or for example, if the cord for the machine is in the way, you can just simply push it up, push it over, and then drop it back down. So all that is nice. And the twisting feature is very smooth, like I mentioned. But unfortunately, there's a couple issues with it. Again, it's very smooth, but if you notice, if I'm trying to steer around something and I go to twist, it doesn't really move all that much. Like, it sort of steers it, but it doesn't really twist it. As you can see, I twisted the main body a good fair amount, almost completely parallel to the floor, or I guess perpendicular to the floor, almost completely perpendicular to the floor, and yet it barely went around the edge. I have to completely steer my entire body and the entire machine to go all the way around the edge. Something that I know a lot of people like to give Dyson shit for some reason, but the ball actually is better at that because it's turning at the machine as it's turning the steering mechanism, so it's all moving in one swift motion. Whereas with this, it feels a little bit disconnected. And I have the same complaint with the Dart. Although, since this machine is a lot heavier, you feel it a lot more in your wrist and in your shoulder. So I don't actually like using the swivel neck on this because it just feels like I'm straining my entire arm and my shoulder as I try to turn it, especially for fairly lackluster swivel results. So while it is nice to have, it definitely makes you moving the machine very smooth. Because of the weight of the machine and because of the weight that's on your hand, which is a lot, it isn't exactly the best swivel neck system as a whole compared to other machines in its price range. I actually do give the Dyson the edge there. Even though the swivel on it is a lot more jarring because it's really just a wheel sliding on a bearing, it's not nearly as elegant of a solution as this. But in practice, it steers a lot better, and it steers with a lot more sort of purpose in terms of the direction you're trying to go. See, this is great if you're trying to steer around something like this. Like you can see right there, I've got the suitcase, and then I've got the basket right there. So if I'm trying to swivel around that, it's great. But as you can see, just for that little bit of nozzle movement, I'm having to move the actual machine a really far amount. And no one in these reviews have ever mentioned that on their U1s. There's also this weird little sort of bug. It's not really a bug, but if you put it in the upright position without it all the way lined up, it'll kind of sag to one side, and then you have to twist it back up until it latches back into place, and you'll hear the click. So it's like two separate joints. Now, as long as you basically center it with the guides, which is easy enough to do because you can actually see the seam right here, it's easy enough to get it all in one swift motion. But even then, a lot of times it doesn't lock. You can see I had to twist it a little bit to get it to lock back into place. Again, it's not a deal breaker, and the Dyson that I mentioned does have its own problems when you're trying to put it in the upright position where the wheels don't exactly engage properly. So it's not at all a knock against this Miele. But just like with the Dyson, there are some instances where putting in the upright position can be a little tricky if you're not paying attention to the way you're doing it. So the swivel neck is a great feature, but it doesn't actually move the head as much as it needs to be, at least in my eyes, an effective swivel neck in terms of going around corners and steering around objects. It does add to the experience, but the sheer weight of the machine definitely hurts it. I really wish there was a lightweight model of this, because if there was, it would be darn near perfect. It would be close to a perfect vacuum. As is, this machine weighs 20 pounds, and it's a heavy 20 pounds, which on the bright side, this machine is very sturdy. It has a lot of bulk to it. It has a lot of density to it. It's definitely built very, very well. Honey, honey. Yeah. He just came back from the vet today, so he's probably in a little bit of pain. I know, honey. He's coming down from the anesthesia, too, which is not great. I know, honey. I'm sorry. I know, honey. Anyways, I know someone in one of my previous videos complained about there being cats in the video, which all I have to say is yeah. So anyways, this particular Miele is definitely one of my favorite vacuums. I really enjoy it, but and I will preface this but by saying the only complaint that I really have with it is the weight. And if there is any reason I stop using this machine, which there likely will be, it will be because of the weight and because of the strain from using this. I love using the hose. It cleans very well. It's super quiet. It's the quietest vacuum I have, and I really, really like that. but it just depends on what you value. If you're sensitive to heavy machines, this probably isn't for you. One reason why this may be for you, though, is filtration. The filter setup on this machine does differ slightly depending on which model you have. Pretty much every single one of these have the exact same bag setup. There's a button right here, you pull it, and the bag door opens. It kind of locks into this like weird position, and it's kind of awkward to like get it back into the main position because it doesn't really line up right sometimes. It's on this like weird little cam setup, and the reason why it does that is it's supposed to lock it out of the way, so that way you don't have to remove the bag door and risk losing it. But it can be a little bit tricky. You know, one other thing I'll mention is that this bag was close to empty whenever I started using this, and there's stuff all the way up here. Now, it's obviously not as full as it could be. It's definitely got some give to it, but this thing has been performing very well, and there's definitely a lot of junk in here. There also is a pre-motor filter right back there that you actually replace with a pack of bags. This is definitely one of the few machines that you can't really get away with running genuine or with running non-genuine bags. It's definitely recommended that you buy the genuine ones. You can get a pack of them for around 23, 25 bucks. And I believe it gets you, I want to say like 4 or 5 bags, but I forgot off the top of my head how many are in the pack. But you got a good chunk of these bags and one of those filters in there. It all comes as a set. And these bags are super soft. I don't know what it is, but these are like pillows. Like, I could totally sleep on this. This is just super soft and super comfy. And unlike the SIBO bags, which I complained about the SIBO bags and all my SIBO reviews, there's nothing on the outside of this bag. This bag is clean. I can lick the outside of this bag and I'm not going to get anything as far as dust on my tongue. Anyways, so this does a great job at filtering. There's no dust on the inside of here. There's no dust. Excellent, 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 excellent. So no complaints there. Now, some people have reported that the bag docks do have a problem with breaking and falling off of these machines. And then there's other people that have shown themselves lifting the machine from the bag dock and it not breaking. So I guess your mileage may vary on that. So the way this works is it looks like it's loose right now, which it is. There's a guide in the bag door that actually pushes this up onto the fitting as you close it. So it stays kind of loose like this, but just the process of closing it seals it up, which is kind of a smart design because it means you don't have to worry about actually getting in there all the way. It just does it for you. And then once you pull this down, you can pull this down and then you can start pulling out the bag. And the dock kind of sits down. There's a little flap that jumps in the way. I don't really like the way this bag is designed, how there's like a flap you have to fold down. Kind of defeats the purpose of having a top fill bag. At least from what it looks to me. Just the way this is seamed is kind of strange to me, at least. Because you have to twist this up like this, which feels like it would put more pressure on the bag collar. But we can see the bag dock right here. Again, it's spring-loaded, so theoretically this should be able to hold itself up, assuming the springs don't break over time. And right here we've got our pre-motor filter, which doesn't really do a whole lot. It's just there to protect the motor intake in case the bag breaks or in case, you know, the bag falls off or something like that. So you definitely got that, and that works really well. And then we can take, which of course getting this back in is probably going to be a pain, but we can take this, line it up, and push it back up into place. Take the bag, squish it in there, just give it the old squishy, and then again you have to kind of like ratchet this back up just like that, which kind of feels like you're going to break it. And then you have to line this up and push it on until it clicks into place. Again, it's a little awkward, but it does work. And there's a similar design with the post motor filter. So there's a little tab that flips up and you've got a few different filters. Now this one's just the basic air clean filter. There's not really anything special about it. It's just a small piece of felt filter in a cage. Mine is a bit due for replacement. It's supposed to be white. As you can see, it's black on the inside. They do make HEPA filters for this, and if you have one of these air clean filters, I'd say it's probably best to replace it with a HEPA filter. That's what I eventually plan on doing. But that just slides back in there. It can sometimes be a little awkward to tell which side goes in, but if you notice, it's this side. So as you can see, where this tab is, you want the tab to be facing towards the machine, and you just pop this open whenever the time comes to replace this air clean filter. So it just pops out and you can replace it, and you reuse this little guard, and that just slides in. And again, it sits in there very loose. At first I thought this was a fault, but as you close it, you probably can't see it, but as you close it, it actually pushes it against the exhaust, and that's what helps keep it on, because whenever it's pushed on, it's like that, and it's making a decent seal. So the actual door kind of pushes, these little grates push it in place and helps lock it and seal it in. So filtration on this, A+. Cleaning performance on carpets and bare floors, pretty much A+ for the most part. More so carpets than bare floors, but that's generally the story with any upright without a soft brush. And it also is decently maneuverable, but it is very heavy, so the heaviness is definitely a downside. Also, the price of expendables is definitely a downside. These are probably some of the most expensive bags and filters you're going to find in the industry, especially when you compare it to something like SIBO. But it's still pretty solid, and there's not really any real issues. I kind of complained about it at first, but if you think about it, considering how well made the bags are, and what kind of material really goes into them, them being $23 for a pack of bags isn't the end of the world. And the bags are pretty large, so they do last a while too. They can get a smell in them, I will say that. Just like a lot of vacuums, bagged and bagless, you can definitely get a smell in the machine. When I first turned this on after not touching it for a while, the little bit of dirt that was at the bottom of the bag did produce a pretty hefty smell. But after I threw some of those laundry beads down on the floor, like the ones like the Downy Unstoppables, I threw some of those on the floor and vacuumed them up and haven't had any problems since. So I definitely recommend that, whether you have bagged or bagless vacuums, but especially bagged ones, since obviously you can't just dump it whenever. So that makes a big difference. And as you can tell, I'm overall very positive. If this thing just simply was lighter weight and wasn't so heavy, then this would be pretty much the perfect vacuum, at least for me. But it's very quiet, it's very versatile, it has amazing tools with an amazing tool setup and excellent built-in tools. They're all on board, and none of the tools were combination tools or an afterthought like Dyson and SIBO, and they overall just work really, really well. So again, while this machine isn't perfect, no machine is perfect, again, the weight is the biggest thing, and it very well may be the reason why I stopped using this machine, because it hurts to vacuum with this after a while, at least for me. I'm very sensitive when it comes to heavy machines, so if you're in that boat like I am, if you have back or shoulder problems, this is not the vacuum for you. But neither is the Dart or the Felix, because just like those machines, this machine is very heavy in the hand. So that's not a great thing for any of those machines. Ironically, the G and the X series are better in terms of handle weight than any of these other ones, despite them not having swivel necks. So handle weight and overall weight is definitely a con, but the tool usage is excellent. The carpet cleaning performance is excellent. The machine's very quiet, very powerful, filters very well, and has a lot of customizable features in terms of suction and other things. So you've definitely got a solid machine, and I definitely really like it. And I do recommend it. Obviously, it's not on the market anymore, and even if it was, I don't think I recommend it for full price. But it definitely is a solid machine. It's built very well. The parts are available for a while, so even if you get one used, you can be confident that you can get it fixed at a local dealer. It's definitely not the easiest machine to repair. The way it's put together is a little strange, but it's definitely not unfixable by any stretch of the imagination. So I definitely really like it. This model also has a back check indicator, so that's a fun little feature as well. So yeah, I mean, that's really all there is to say. Probably my biggest complaint, like in addition to the weight, is just the handle. I forgot to mention that earlier, but as much as I loved the handle for the hose, the actual main handle is really poor for some reason. Of course, I can't really pull this down because that pedal gets in the way, but this handle is not very well designed. It's not very comfortable, and with how much weight there is in the handle and in the machine, it's not great to actually use a swivel neck on it. So that is another reason why I may stop using this machine, is just handling and weight, because I don't like the main handle on this machine, and I don't like the weight, especially in the hand, but also when carrying it. So just keep that in mind if you're sensitive. Otherwise, I really like this machine. It's an excellent vacuum if you can get over the weight, and it's definitely a machine where I could be confident that I could use it for a really long time and not be worried about it breaking. Although, remember, I use Bissell's that are 20 years old and they still run perfectly. So I'm not exactly a person who beats up their vacuums. So I'm not going to tell you that something is, is gonna last versus something else for the most part, unless it is like painfully obvious that the machine's built bad, because anything that I use can last a long time, and so can yours if you actually take care of your machines. But especially this machine, you can definitely run this for a number of years, as long as you stay up to date on bags and maintenance, and make sure not to suck up anything too big so it doesn't clog, because obviously that whole chamber on the back can be a bit of a pain to get into. But other than that, it's a great machine. I definitely recommend it, and there's not really much else to say about it. So yeah, this is Intellitech Studios signing out with my review of the Miele U1 Dynamic Twist Powerline Power Plus. And this particular machine is definitely one that I'm really happy to have in the collection. So let me know your thoughts on this machine. If you have any experience with this machine, let me know in the comments below. Do you have this machine? Do you still use it? And if you don't, what did you decide to use instead, assuming you did use this at one point? I'd love to know. So anyways, this is Intellitech Studios signing out. I'll see you guys in the next video, and I hope you all have a good one. Peace.